Hello, good to see everybody. We just to let everybody know we are going to be recording this session. So if there's any issues with that, yeah, please do let us know. But if you miss anything, then you'll be able to view it later on. We'll have that available to us. All right, so we're going to get straight into it. First of all, I would like to do a introduction for Dr. Leah DiBello. As a researcher for ACI Labs, Dr. DiBello has developed a whole range of innovative, non-verbal methods of assessing skill and business judgment among executives. She's the innovator behind the FutureView profiler, which has been recognised as a theoretical and methodological breakthrough in knowledge elicitation and executive intelligence. It was also awarded an Innovative Technology Award by Tech America in 2008 and funded by research awards from the National Science Foundation. Leah is best known for the development of a particular kind of activity-based strategic rehearsal approach that she's been shown to greatly accelerate learning and business performance through cognitive reorganisation. Studies of over 7,000 people at all levels exposed to Leah's methods indicate that learning was accelerated by several months in all cases. Other studies indicate that unprecedented performance improvements and significant competitive advantages were achieved by companies using Leah's methods. The method is now used globally in 4 continents in industries as diverse as mining, transportation, financial services, IT implementation, manufacturing, pharmaceuticals, as well as others. Numerous articles have been published on its business benefits and theoretical significance in cognitive science. ACI Labs and FutureView are now working closely together with to bring this model into the field of project management with the Project Bureau. We're really excited by what this will achieve for the profession in helping making projects more successful, because when projects are successful, society benefits. Without further ado, then I would like to hand over to Dr. Leah DiBello, and welcome, who's dialing in from California today, and I'll let you take it from here.
Hi, everybody. I'm in California. It's nice to be talking to people in Australia again. I've done a lot of work there, particularly in the mining industry. And what I'm going to be talking about today is basically some research that we've done on accelerating, using our methods for project management expertise. So I'm going to give a little bit of history, and then I'm going to talk about the science behind it, and also some specific studies and applications. So this will be very project management focused. The reason I say that is because we do a lot of stuff. FutureView is a platform that can be used to rehearse actual projects, to accelerate expertise in project management, and also to just help businesses plan their future. So it's a pretty generic platform at this point. Now, did my slide advance? Oh, there we go. Okay, so there's no question that project management is very important, particularly to corporate performance, and definitely to U.S. competitiveness and the competitiveness of other countries. We like to look at projects, particularly capital-intensive projects, as tools for taking a corporation to a new level. And that's basically how the CEO and boards of directors think of projects. You know, we did some research on what is a project for, and it's basically a tool to advance the agenda or the strategy of a corporation. As a result, projects have gotten more complicated and more critical to businesses, and yet since 1970, there has not really been much advancement in the success rate. So here we have some what we call Callium's catalog of catastrophe, And this was published in 2014. And when I looked at the more recent stuff, I realized it's even worse. So we'll stick with this. Um, Basically, most projects do not, about 70% of projects do not deliver the promised benefits. Some are marginally successful, some deliver some benefits, some fail altogether. But basically, the rationale for funding the project 70% of the time is not realized. The promise is not realized at the board level. So our question was, can the science of accelerated learning through rehearsal, which we know has accelerated the strategy of, we've worked with over 60 companies at this point, and we've actually been able to double the stock price and market cap of some of the multi-billion-dollar ones. And we looked at that and we said, what we've really done is help them with their projects. They were rehearsing their future, but they were also deciding what capital projects should they keep, which ones should they get rid of, and what should they do to advance the ball even more. So we started looking at project management skill as a cognitive capability. These are our books. I have to show you these because it's, our publicist says I have to, but basically we started doing a lot of publications about this issue. So what is the next level of project management expertise? This is an example. In 2010, IBM Research asked us to do a study on this. They said, you're experts on expertise. Can you apply your capabilities to see if there's such thing as a superstar project manager? And this is the taxonomy right here. We identified 6 levels of project management expertise. So a level 6 person would be kind of like a chess master. And it turned out that out of the 350 engagement managers that we studied at IBM Global Business Services, only 6 people were at level 6, which is sad. What is a superstar? And this is what characterized them or distinguished them. They can manage important factors from anywhere. In other words, some of the interviews I did were by phone, and I felt like they were right with me. They can identify risks and turn them into opportunities. So when a project goes south, which it does very often, as you know, they say, this is not a problem, this is an opportunity. We just have to pivot the prism and look at it differently. And they also, and this is very important because this is not often taught to project managers, they understand the reason for the project. What does the CEO or the C-suite and the board of directors hope to gain with this project, and is it being realized? How does it fit with the business? And when they see that it's not a good fit, they're very good at making radical changes if better business benefits can be achieved with a new approach. In cognitive science, among the cognitive scientists who study expertise, and there are a few of us, but we all belong to the same society, this level of skill is called intuitive expertise. And this is usually not studied in business domains. This is usually studied among physicists, rocket scientists, people who have mission critical jobs where if they don't do them well, people could die. But the same methods actually showed that, and it's not clear that if you're a poor project manager, people won't die. So that's another issue. But we realize that in business, there are these kind of intuitive experts the same way there are in physics and medicine and so on. Now, the research also showed some things that were not so fun to learn, which is almost all of these superstars had suffered a huge disaster in their careers. And this is true of experts in general. Expert surgeons tend to have killed a few people. Uh, Physicists have made very significant mistakes, which elevated them to the next level of understanding their domain. And it's no different with project managers. All of the superstars that we interviewed actually survived a very significant failure or two in their careers. Things that cost IBM or a similar company, 50 to $100 million. These were not small errors. The problem is that experience of this kind is never voluntary. People find themselves in this situation and they don't really deliberately make people fail at the multi-million-dollar level because it's very risky and they can't afford it. But when it does happen by mistake, actually it does help people develop new levels of expertise. So just like the rest of our work, which we've been doing now for decades, we said maybe we can do this in a virtual way. And we know that the brain does not really experience well-designed simulations as unreal. We all have been in situations like even a great movie where we felt like we were there. It's actually not that hard to trick the brain. And we also know that the brain does not have a sense of time. It only has a sense of cycles, activity cycles. So lots of times we have an experience of time feeling like it's going very quickly or going very slow when actually it's not. And that's because your brain actually creates its own sense of time. Now, we thought maybe we could use virtual rehearsals to accelerate the rate at which people become superstars by having them fail safely. Now, important to note, this does not replace the fundamental education required for project management content knowledge. You still have to know what a schedule is. You still have to be able to use a work order system. Those kinds of what we call acquisitional skills do have to be in place. So the example I like to use is if you want to be a Hemingway, you need to learn to read and write first. Then you can become a great writer or a great reader. It's the same with project management. You still need the fundamentals, but you cannot become an expert with the fundamentals alone. So that was the research we did for IBM, and now I'm going to give you a little background on accelerated learning rehearsals, and you'll kind of see how this all connects. Did I go too fast? Yes. So basically, for many years, we did rehearsals with physical models. And here's one of them. This is a 22-foot model of a uranium refinement cascade. And if you were in the room with it, it would have a deafening hum. It actually ran at several different levels. And it had about 120 little tiny turbines that were programmed to fail according to a cycle. And each of these cells was programmed to put out a certain amount of production when it was running at 3 different levels. So the output would change. This is USEC, which is United, I can't remember what the acronym stands for, but this is one of the only 2 companies in the world that makes nuclear fuel rods for nuclear power plants. So they had never been profitable in 50 years, and our job was to get them to rehearse a profitable future by changing the way that production, maintenance, planning, all those different functions work together. Now, this was a very successful project. They only played this exercise for 2 days, 2 8-hour days, and as a result, the company became profitable for the first time in 50 years. What's nice about rehearsals is if you actually rehearse your future or a skill and you iteratively trial and error to up your capability, it transfers back to real work instantly, particularly if the people who go through it together work together. But as you can imagine, this was a massive pain. This model not only was very difficult to build and took a lot of research. What do we put in it? What do we not put in it? What's important to represent? But we had to get it through airport security, which was not easy because it looked like a weapon. So we decided we really need a different approach. So here is the evolution of our approach. As you can see on the left, there's physical models. If you can see my cursor, this top one was a medical company that was failing. This is a biotech company down here. They all did much, much better as a result of just 16 hours of rehearsal. The medical device company went from 300 million and losing 800,000 a day to being sold for several billion. And the medical device company, or rather the healthcare company, were able to quadruple in size after they rehearsed an effective approach that would carry them into the future. We realized that what all of these models had in common was smart artifacts. Artifacts that people could do things with, like practice their future in a different way, and the artifact itself would give them feedback on how they were doing and roll up to a financial model. So here you see some charts. This was pretty much automated based on the behavior people executed with the models. So we said, how do we do this? This is the universal recipe. How do we do this without having to spend months building models and flying them all over the world? So we started working with virtual worlds, starting with IBM. And here's a little manufacturing company here in the middle on the top. And that was our first one. It was in OpenSim. And it was pretty crude, but we were able to turn around an IBM engagement management team in Beijing during the Olympics from California by having them practice doing virtual project management the way that IBM wanted them to do it. So a team that had been failing for 3 years in just 16 hours of gaming became superstars. And that project won an award. So we said, okay, we're convinced maybe virtual worlds will work. And here's some over here on the right, and here's some hybrid models where people are face-to-face, but also in a virtual world. And that was a very good approach for companies that work all over the world. So the picture on the lower right is a senior executive team of a $30 billion financial company. And the screens behind them, which you can't see, were 6 areas of the world they work in, and they could enter into those virtually and interact with people. Here's another model. I thought I'd show you this because this is from Australia. This is a mining company where they innovated their copper processing with a different froth flotation model. This is a model. They're actually refining kitty litter with little grains of pellets in them, and they're using soap instead of toxic chemicals. And this is the automated metrics that they use. So you get an idea, I think, of what we were trying to automate. So this model is a smart model. As people make decisions and do things differently, it sends messages to these spreadsheets so they can see how they're doing. And as you can see, they're doing much better. The concentrate shift is going much better. We also had a 100 by 50 foot model of their mine that I'm not showing you a picture of, but that's off to the left. Now, critical to our success is FutureView. And before we did rehearsals in a virtual world and we were doing them physically, we made the objects smart with our software, a FutureView event generator and a FutureView metrics engine. They were just attached to physical objects. And I'm not going to go into this because you'll be able to look at the recording later. But basically, what the FutureView event generator does is it creates an unfolding probable future that you can rehearse different strategies in. And it can be extremely complicated. Here's an example of a country feature database that FutureView event generator created for a financial services company. And it had over 1 million specific banking transactions that it created according to a pattern of where we thought the market might go. So there were downturns, economic crises and upturns, and it was able to create all of the micro transactions that would happen as a result of those and roll them out. And we had about 25 years of data for them to play with. And then you can play the game again, run it again, and create a slightly different future. As a result of that, we were able to basically, I won't summarize this, but at this point in time, we're at creating about $20 billion of value for the larger companies that we've worked with. We don't necessarily count the smaller ones. Now, the IBM experiment with project management was interesting because we used the event generator, but we attached it to the virtual world. And we wanted to know, will it have the same impact if it's attached to a virtual world? So all the unfolding events would happen in a virtual world that people could enter into. And is there a role, is there a way that this can develop these superstars that we identified in the first part of the study? Here are some screenshots which actually cracked me up because we would make nothing that looks like this now. This was very crude beginning, but what you can see up on the wall is the event generator. And whenever they manipulated, shipped, or ordered parts for this factory system, which they did through an ERP system, which was also attached to the virtual world, these numbers would change automatically, and they could see how they were doing. If they ordered way too many parts, the parts would literally fill this whole warehouse. So they could see visually when they were off. Now, these two little people here are me and one of my colleagues. This was a fully immersive multiplayer virtual world. And over here on the right, we have their strategy that they're rehearsing. We have a bunch of people sitting at the table, and they're going through a PowerPoint deck. So we were able to attach through APIs everything that you would need to do a project. Now, this is the team in Beijing, and you can see they're all sitting around and they're trying to see how they're doing. So this board here was dynamic. It automatically calculated the financial benefit and the costs of everything they did, every decision, because all of the parts in the factories were smart, and they would send a message to the metrics engine, which would then calculate a financial impact. And there were thousands of virtual parts. This is how they did the first day. Not so great. Their revenue forecast is this light green line. Their cost was close to that, and their actual revenue is pretty low, and it's declining. It's right here. So ignore this down to zero thing. That's just the way the tool worked at the time. Now, this is how they did the second time they tried it. They finally glommed on to what it would require. And what they learned from this is we can't just make sure that all of the tasks on the project are met. We have to make the customer successful. And when the customer is not being successful, we have to interrogate the tasks in the project and ask ourselves if we have the right ones. Is this really providing the benefit that the customer is buying from IBM? And as you can see, they really did like an amazing job. Their target revenue was this blue line right here. We calculated the ideal, which is a little bit above the cost, and their actual revenue was much higher, and their profit margin is the delta here. So they did extremely well. Now, this is the technology engine that runs FutureView, and this is my way of looking at it. This is not the developer's architectural drawing. But this tells you that you have a 3D virtual world here, and a lot of people doing serious gaming use 3D virtual worlds or 3D environments. The event generator, this dynamic strategic economic modeler, which automatically calculates the value of what's going on. And then there's a core simulator that kind of pulls it all together, and then all the APIs for external software. And I think most important of all is the behavioral tracking. We can log every behavior, every decision that every person makes with any object. So we can tell whether they ordered too many parts, we can tell where the parts are, and if they're not moving efficiently through the factories. And all of that behavior tracking makes our platform very powerful. And then, we can write a little program to export all the reports that you might want from that, or analyze the data later. Now, this is what the technology actually looks like. I'm showing you an example of somebody who's using FutureView to run a portfolio of mines that they own. So this is a portfolio management tool, and they're actually using it not just to plan it, but actually do it. So here are the 6 mines in their portfolio, and you can see a little person in the bottom. They're digital twins of the mining projects that you can actually go into and meet at. Here's a control room that tracks all the metrics of all the mines. So you can see, do you have the right mines? Are each of them running efficiently? Is one of them not fitting with the portfolio? And you can manage quite a bit there. And then here is the same back end that we use for every project, basically doing all the thinking and AI that makes this possible. This is an example of a GUI interface that the client can use to set parameters of how they want the event generator to work. This happens to be a mining example where they were rehearsing the implementation, a project where they were implementing cycle-based scheduled maintenance for all the heavy equipment. Now, the net result is that level 3 project managers develop skills at level 5 or 6 within about 8 hours of game time. This is something that normally takes 10 years. And this was pretty astonishing. We analyzed the data a couple times to be sure. The normal development time is a minimum of 2 years and usually longer or not at all. Are there any questions at this point? Okay. Now, we have a theory as cognitive scientists of why this works. Basically, we think that a lot of learning of advanced capability is really unlearning. That you have a set of habits that you've developed that may not be working with the way the world is changing. And we all tend to default to a way of working that we've learned that's been adaptive for us in our past, particularly at work. We know that human beings have not evolved in 170,000 years. Biologically, we're the same. And we know that we've survived ice ages and all kinds of bad things as a species. So the question is, how did we do that? It turns out that we don't really learn that much, relatively speaking, from school. School's only a couple hundred years old, and yet we've been learning for 170,000 years. Put that on a timeline and you see that we've been in school for like a minute, right, as a species. So how do we do this? Well, whenever your brain senses that a behavior is not adaptive, it experiences it as a threat to your survival. Um, the adaptive unconscious, which is involved in this, is very primitive but very powerful. It learns 200,000 times faster than what you use to learn things in school, but it also takes every failure as a threat to physical survival. And it automatically starts to search for new patterns that are more adaptive. So if you put, and we've done this, if you put an EEG cap on somebody's head and you give them a puzzle in which they experience failure and they don't expect it, the spread of activation in that moment is huge. The whole brain lights up, looking for a new path. But it also can be very anxiety provoking and frightening to have that failure. So we realized that we can design virtual worlds for safe failure, which is actually what makes games fun. You know you're not going to die, but you also know that that threat to your survival feeling is going to be activated, and you are motivated to level up. So it bypasses the part of the brain that shuts down learning and causes fear and anxiety, and it activates the part of the brain that looks for new pathways. But we've also figured out that you need at least 65 decision points in a game to get the needle moved. And 65 decision points is probably what you'd experience in a couple of years. So it's very heavily time compressed. And the feedback has to be immediate. So the National Science Foundation funded us to see if we could make a product for general project management capability and to test it. And we did that, and we were very successful. We worked in partnership with the Project Management Institute, and we studied about 700 of their members worldwide, and the significance of the elevation and expertise to level 5 was so statistically significant. We had 3 different parties reanalyze the data to make sure we were right. For those of you who understand how research works, a p-value of 0.05 is highly significant. We had a p-value of 0.0002, which is almost, there's no probability that it was by chance. Here are some of the environments where we're implementing now. Retail, as you can see, we've come a long way in our graphics. Disaster response design and technologies, implementing those. Here's a control room for the mining company that I showed you that's running their portfolio. This is the control room. You can see a lot of live boards here. These actually track actual project progress. And here's a bunch of people talking about it here. This is a capital projects implementation in mining, where they're implementing a new way of discovering the ore body below the ground, and also controlling dust and airborne pollution. Ignore the logo on the side of the truck. We're not supposed to show you that, but that's who the client is. And here we are working with the Marines on a project to help them plan and manage extremely unusual events that might require their response. And the result of this will be that the airport, this is a commercial airport, the scenario is that a terrorist is in the airport, but the airport authority does not want operations to be disrupted or shut down, and the Marines have to figure out how to do that, and they also have to advise airlines and commercial airports how to design their airports so that they're easy to control bad things like this. Here they are again. So for example, if you have multiple separated baggage claims. It would be easier to control a bad thing. And this is something that we're doing where if there is a threat in a large city, how would you contain that? And what aspects of cities should be planned in for that eventuality? And that's all I have. Thank you for listening. Does anyone have any questions?
Thanks for that, Leah. It's really good. Yeah, Ben had a question. Is it sustainable against the progress of a superstar?
Is the superstar's progress capability sustainable? Is that the question?
Ben, I don't know if you can unmute your mic and
Yeah, look,
clarify.
I'm more than happy to.
Yep.
Thanks, Leah. Really compelling presentation. I'm just curious as to how sustainable. There's the superstar who's gone through the experience and they've learned, through failure, as you mentioned. But there's this new accelerated process that you've outlined. Is there a difference between how enduring or the longevity of that expertise, or is there no difference?
There's no difference that we've been able to find. So, for example, when we've worked with companies where we work with the whole team to level them all up and run the company better, they don't go back. They don't fail later. And then when we've worked with miners on emergency response safety, and we go back and test them 9 months later, there's no degradation in the capability that they've developed. And full disclosure, I'm also an advisor to the Air Force, and this has been known for a while that that this type of approach, it's called cognitive transformation theory. It does cause an enduring capability, and it does not degrade easily. It's just been kind of confined to elite troops until now.
Okay, thank you. Perfect.
Okay, you're welcome.
Thanks, Ben. Were there any other questions that you could either unmute your mic and ask, or put something in the chat, whatever works for you best.
Well, let me ask a question of the people that are listening. Do you see that project management capability could benefit from something like this? Can you see that, how that might work?
It's Bryce here, Leah.
I'm sorry?
Sorry, Ben. Sorry, Ben, I cut Ben off. I can see how it could apply and the, I guess, transferable skill and how it might apply to project management. I'm interested. I had PMO at a healthcare, government healthcare industry in Australia, and I'm interested to know how that might apply. I guess the industries you've spoken about are quite, I guess, specific to a specific function, and I don't know all the complexities that go into each of those industries. For mining, for example, I'm not in that industry, so I can't talk to that, but using healthcare as my only example, it's got a lot of moving parts, a lot of projects that rely or have a lot of critical independencies and things like that. So I'm interested to know how this modeling might apply to something, organization or an industry that's quite intertwined and complex, I guess.
Well, I'm trying to find a picture for you. Yes, actually, it was built for complicated situations with lots of moving parts. In fact, one of the things we say is that FutureView is for problems that are too big to solve in 2 dimensions, that you need to externalize it into some kind of 3D model just to kind of arrange the blocks and see what the best arrangement would be. So, we've all done situations where we're trying to figure out a difficult problem, and we either draw it out or we set up little chess pieces and move them to try to help us with our thinking. that's kind of what this does. And if you look at the picture that I have up now, this company is a healthcare company up on the upper left. And they were really struggling with, in the US, healthcare for so-called poor people was handled very differently than people who get their healthcare through employers. And they wanted to what they call privatize healthcare so that people could be members of a healthcare plan even though they were poverty stricken, and that they would get the same benefits as wealthy people. And the idea was, their motivation was that people who are poor in the United States are who have a particular disease, say diabetes, and are 40 years old, are much more likely to die or get worse than a 40-year-old with the same medical profile who is wealthier or middle class. And they wanted to get rid of that disparity. So we constructed an exercise for them with electronic medical records, with 3 different size inner city clinics, and we got both the medical clinics and the insurance company, the payers, to work together on a solution that would eliminate the outcome disparities entirely and yet reduce the cost per patient so that more people could be members of this plan. And it was very successful. It won an award from the Robert Wood Johnson Foundation, and they were able to quadruple in size. But until then, before they played this out in a model, they had all kinds of workarounds, and this is too complicated, we have to work around this, we have to work around that. Inner city clinics charge for unnecessary medical procedures because they're struggling financially, et cetera, et cetera. So we said, okay, your non-negotiable goal is reducing outcome disparities and keeping the cost per patient down to the point that you can accommodate more patients. Figure it out. And they did. But they did it by playing with different options in a model.
Wow, I think that's amazing. That's great.
It was pretty amazing. It was a very amazing experience to work with them, actually, because I wasn't sure what would happen. But and the solution was very counterintuitive. The doctors said, if we have access to the data from the insurance records, we could probably tell you from premorbid subtle symptoms who's at risk for getting sicker. And we could do aggressive, proactive care with those people and keep them from getting sick. But we need the data. So they sanitized the data so that nobody's privacy would be eliminated, but they found trends by demographic area or geographic area, and they implemented very effective programs that the insurance company was happy to pay for because it increased the positive outcomes for patients and kept the costs low because they didn't get sicker.
Excellent. Thanks for that question, Bryce. Ben, did you have another one? Was it you coming in there?
No, thank you. That was fine.
Okay. Was somebody else coming in with a question when Bryce came in? No. Okay.
Well, then I'll ask another question since nobody's asking theirs. Do you see project management skill as I mean, when I talk to people, they only talk to me because they're scared and they feel like their skills are becoming irrelevant and they're going to fail. Do you see anxiety like that among project managers? Are they worried about their effectiveness or not?
I think we experience that a bit here, for sure. There's an anxiety associated with not meeting the milestones or the goals that have been set up for whatever the project is. And I think it's interesting because I think a lot of people that claim to be project managers might not be highly skilled in that area. It's just an easy way to say, yes, I can manage a project, but I think there's managing a project and there's managing a project. And I think the skill deficit might be related to that anxiety of failure.
Do you think people would be less anxious if they felt that they had a way to become more highly skilled in a gamified?
Absolutely. Absolutely.
Well, one of the things Andrew and I have been talking about is ways to bring that to Australia. And, you know, I'm just curious about the interest in that, in just providing people those opportunities.
I'd throw in another perspective, Leah, and hello there.
Hi.
I perhaps because I talk less to project managers and more to the senior executives, and the senior execs, they're desperate for change and transformation. They know that they need it, and it's been. I think they're facing the reality that the last few years and some of government response to the epidemic has forced upon them changes, particularly around the way they deal with their workforce, as well as the volume of transformation, not just change, that they have to deal with. And they know they've got to do it, but they're frightened of doing it because they're sitting back saying, but I can blow all this money on these critical projects, but history tells us the success rate is 36%. So they're saying, 64%, whatever I do, it's going to crash and burn. And it might not be an outright failure, but it's either going to be over budget, late, or significantly miss on expectations. And they're sitting there with a belief that 20% of their projects are just going to totally fail outright and they have to walk away. Right. They're frightened. For them, the risk, costs and consequences are massive, and they're earnest about finding ways to, because I see project management as a form of change management. I think they do too. They're earnest to evaluate methods that would reduce their risk of failure. It's interesting. They're driven by fear.
Yeah.
Really
well,
are.
I mean, one of the things I see is that, you know, because I mostly deal with the C-suite, as you know, Jeff, and they don't have a lot of faith in PMOs. Yeah. They sort of feel that it's it's kind of like going to the dentist. You know, you hope they know what they're doing, but you're not counting on it. Maybe the dentist is the wrong analogy, but in other words, you're trusting people that are certified or licensed to do things, but you know there's a very high rate, there's a big risk for you, and you have no control over it. And the nice thing about the superstars is that they usually are very facile at talking to the C-suite, and they're very good at taking their perspective and seeing the risk from their point of view.
Yeah.
Definitely. Sorry.
No, go ahead.
Yeah, I definitely agree with the findings around the PMOs, and I know that's a heavy part of the research that I'm doing right now. And part of that research is that the majority of PMOs have a lifespan of around 18 months. Now, when we look at any organisation standing up a PMO, and we're looking at the cost of doing that, you know, 4, 5, 6 people, easy, $700,000 in wages alone, to receive no perceived benefits after 18 months and having to shut it down again, is an incredible waste of money. So this is where I see something like FutureView could really help. I think turn things around with the skill set of the and Bryce raised a really important point about the skills of the project managers. It's way too easy at the moment. I think not only in Australia but all over the world for anybody to put project manager on the bottom of their signature block and all of a sudden be responsible for millions of dollars of a company's money. To me, that's baffling. When to be an accountant for somebody that's earning $30,000 a year, you have to have a degree, then do a certified practicing accountant's course, and you've got to do all this continuing education. Yet our project managers don't have that yet. Now we have started down that road with the now the advent of the chartered project management certification that people can get, but it kind of needs to go further, and I think we need to lock that in so that it does become mandatory to have formal qualifications as a project manager, and to be able to and we're not talking. We've been doing research around the various different commercial certifications, and the latest research on that by one of our staff member who's actually running a webinar right now with AIPM is demonstrating that the certifications that are available are having zero significant or zero impact on the success of projects. So your PMP, your Prince 2, all those ones are having no benefit at all to the success of projects, which I find amazing. So we need something that's better, and we've got a tool here in FutureView that enables those project managers to become those superstars and start delivering projects successfully. External to any sort of certifications they've got. Yes, as you mentioned earlier on, Leah, that it's important to have the technical understanding of all those different componentry of running a project, but something else is needed, and I see that FutureView is the tool for that.
Well, I mean, it's kind of like surgeons, right? They go to medical school, but they really don't get to do surgery by themselves until they've done a residency. They have to practice for a couple of years under the supervision of more senior physicians, and you don't learn to do that from a book. I think project management is now complicated enough and critical enough to the success of corporations that it's similar to that. You need to practice.
Yeah, absolutely agree, and I think I've discussed this with you before, Leah. There's roughly around $1 trillion worth of projects run globally each year, and as Jeff mentioned earlier on, about a third of those are failing. That's a significant amount of money that's just completely wasted globally every year. So by doing this projects properly, then we can increase the GDP for countries. So or even the GWP, the worldwide index.
Well, unfortunately, we've become very complacent. Lots of times when we go in and work with a company, we're fixing a failed project. It never had to happen. I mean, it's nice that they call us, but it never had to happen. And when people say, well, this sounds too good to be true, I'm like, antibiotics were too good to be true. And now the average person lives twice as long as they did in 1800 because of the elimination of sepsis and communicable bacteria-based diseases. The average woman lived to be 40 in 1801. And now we're not even old at 40. So I think that sometimes a simple solution is actually seen as too good to be true, but it's actually just the solution is simple. It just doesn't seem that way because we're used to not having it.
Yeah, it is a sad state of affairs when when failure is the norm. So we just get used to that. So yeah. Excellent. Alrighty. So I've just had the 5-minute warning come up on the meeting. Did anybody else have any burning questions for Leah or anybody else before we wrap it up?
I just have one quick question for Leah. About what was the uptake or the I guess the initial feelings from, those C-suite executives with regards to this virtual modeling? Because I can just see, if I pitch this to my executive, there would be a lot of apprehension in the room for doing a project like this in a virtual way. So I'm wondering what the initial feedback was for projects.
Well, everyone that we've done has been very successful. There's been 2 companies that we walked away from because we did, after an initial analysis, we realized we couldn't help them. But we do that first. So we would do something similar with any C-suite. We walk them through how we can help them and how the virtual world works. It's not our primary expertise is in cognitive science, business, and economics. The game engine is something that was developed in service of that. So we're not using a commercial game platform. We're using one that was built for commercial purposes and for increasing the value of corporations. And we show them how it's different and how it works. And then, but even before we have a meeting with the C-suite, we've done quite a bit of research on their company, particularly if they're publicly traded. And we usually have an idea of, what their problem is. And sometimes they'll tell us that they think their problem is X, which is they have terrible project managers and they just need to fire them all. And sometimes we'll say, well, we see it a little differently. And usually that's how we go about it. And in general, we don't really have a problem with getting people to see the value of the virtual world. So we're happy to meet your management anytime. That was supposed to be funny.
I'm serious.
Funny but serious, yes. I mean, basically we've been explaining it to people for 20 years. We're pretty good at it now, unless you disagree after this explanation. But we mostly would start with their industry, their problem. We do research on that, and we would basically talk about what's going on with them. Not really try to sell them the virtual world. The virtual world sells itself. Yeah.
Yeah. Thanks, Leah.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. All right. We're getting very close to time now. So, and being a project manager, I do like to wrap things up on time. Yeah, we might leave it there. Just once again, thank you very much, Leah, for your time and your insights. Yeah, it's incredibly interesting sort of product, and yeah, really hope we can get some good take up of this in Australia. So, especially in the project management environment, and start to turn things around. So. Thank you very much.
Well, thank you. It was a lot of fun.
Thanks, Leah. Thanks, Andrew.
Thank you.
Thanks, everybody, for attending. Take
care. Bye.
Bye-bye. Okay, you're on mute. You're on mute, Jeff. Oh, cool. Hey.